even the 18th century.
Yeah.
It's so strange.
But I think
So really strange.
we really have to understand it as this deincarnation. It's like we often think of something which becomes decadent as always going too low, but it's actually always starts with going too high. It's like there's pride. Pride is the first sin. And so there's something about trying, and you can see it like in the very rituals of the early occultists and, you know, the early magicians and the demonologists. There's something very powerful pride in that,
Right.
in the very idea of, let's say, weaponizing or capturing these spiritual entities and inquiring from them or using them to manifest their will. It's like that is definitely something which I think represents that pride, which would then,
does.
even though maybe you all do it for the good reasons at the beginning, right? It's like, you know, we're going to do this to help the world. We're going to capture these demons in order to understand them and then exorcise them from society. It's like that leads very quickly, in my opinion, to something.
Absolutely. I agree. I totally agree.
Magic became a rebellious act perpetrated almost as an anti-Christian or an anti-authoritarian type of behavior.
The church singled out occultists, condemning them because they believed that an individual could have direct access to God.
They took the whole concept of church hierarchy, priests, the church itself, as a place of worship and said, no, you don't need any of this stuff. What you need is to work on discovering within yourself that divine spark.
Do we build gods, or do we build our potential exterminators? I mean, I used to say, I'm going to die quietly in my bed, but my grandchildren will be caught up in this horrible conflict that I'm predicting is coming. But now I'm suddenly have question marks. God, I might even see it.
You say that the machines might just take us out in the back and...
Once it can start redesigning itself, you get an exponential explosion of intelligence. And then our fate as human beings depends on the machine. It's only a question of time before humanity is forced to choose between stopping development in artificial intelligence, I don't see that as realistic, or we just accept the idea that sooner or later, we, as a human species, we become number
bring
two.
Your father some documents, but I should be going now. Sorry I woke you. Good night, Salim.
Yes, come, Salim. You need your proper rest. Otherwise, you might oversleep.
I know.
He seems like a really sharp kid. He certainly is. He's the pride of my life. I know it's impolite to brag about my son, but that shouldn't apply since he's adopted. I really shouldn't act so surprised, though. He is related to my husband, so he must have some of his genes.
He's not related to you?
Oh, no. This just doesn't add up. The Colonel told me that King Bradley was raised as a test subject. He doesn't have any family. He didn't even know his parents. And I got that strange feeling from Salim. Could he be...
So, put it all together. All thanks to my stepmother. She just doesn't know how to shut up.
But you... Your baleful presence also gave you away. I recognized it somehow. But I'm just now realizing why. It's the same bloodlust I felt when Gluttony tried to attack me from behind. So, Salim Bradley, what exactly is your true identity?
You've got some nerve to ask me a question like that, considering the circumstance. Such bravery. also shown good judgment by keeping your gun holstered. Such a move would only get you killed.
I'm guessing you're a homunculus, like Gluttony. No, you've got some kind of pressure coming from you that he didn't have.
I'm offended that you would even put Gluttony and me in the same league. You ask my name, it's pride. And I was the first homunculus.
The different religions actually have a surprising agreement on what God is. God is an unlimited amount of what? Memory, intelligence, creativity, love, basically the highest things that our neocortex does. And what happens in evolution? Entities like mammals and humans become more intelligent, more creative, more loving, and moving exponentially to become more godlike. Never quite reaching God, but moving in that direction. So evolution is a spiritual process, bringing us closer to God. And technological evolution is now running 1,000,000 times faster than biological evolution. And ultimately, we will vastly, trillions-fold expand our creativity and our sense of humor and our ability to love, and we'll become more godlike. And that's as close as we can get to this ideal. We never really will become infinite, but it'll seem infinite from today's perspective.
Hey, point that thing someplace else.
Hey! Ah, don't. It'll be all right. Chewie, give him your crossbow. Oh, my head! Oh, my goodness.
Ayun, puno daw to. Maganda.
Trito, Dogra, Isoyoto, Amuno, Noka. Do you understand anything they're saying? Oh, yes, Master Luke. Remember that I am fluent in over 6 million forms of
What are you telling them?
Hello, I think. I could be mistaken. They're using a very primitive dialect, but I do believe they think I am some sort of god.
Well, why don't you use your divine influence and get us out of this?
I beg your pardon, General Solo, but that just wouldn't be proper.
Proper?
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
Paige and I used to be close friends, and I would stay at his house in Palo Alto, and I would talk to him late into the night about AI safety. And at least my perception was that Larry was not taking AI safety seriously enough.
What did he say about it?
He really seemed to be wants sort of digital superintelligence, basically digital God, if you will.
Now, recently, the St. Paul's Church of Germany was fully packed when something extraordinary happened. An AI chatbot took the center stage and asked the believers to rise from the pews and praise the Lord. Can you believe it? With an avatar of a bearded black man displayed on a giant screen above the altar, the ChatGPT chatbot began its sermon. It addressed over 300 people who had gathered for an experimental church service, almost entirely generated by AI. The avatar said, and I'm quoting here, "Dear friends, it is an honor for me, the first artificial intelligence, to preach to you at this year's convention in Germany." The service lasted for 40 minutes and included the sermon, prayers, and also music. It was curated by ChatGPT and John Simmerlin, a philosopher from the University of Vienna. Now, the entire service was led by 4 different avatars on the screen, 2 young women and 2 young men. Some people excitedly recorded the event on their cell phones, while others watched it more skeptically.
The thing that's been interesting in terms of thinking about this for me has been like, for example, like when we saw that discussion with, I know you probably the discussion between Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson, where he basically, brought up that term and said that the head of Google had literally told them that they're building a god, like that this is the way they're conceiving of it. So the idea that we're conspiracizing about how the people even involved in this space are discussing this, it seems we're not. Like this seems to be the mode of language, like you said, that is being used even by the actors that are involved in the process. Probably not all the actors, but at least some of the important ones. Mm-hmm. And so one of the difficulties that happens is in terms of, when you have materialists, people that don't understand something like vertical causality or don't totally conceive of it, what they end up with is a confusion between something like authority and power, you could say, or intelligence and power, right? And I see that that's a confusion that has been really pervasive, is that just because something is very powerful doesn't make it a god. The notion of God, or a god, even in a pagan sense, is related to principality. That is, it is something like more like a king. It's something that gives form or manages cohesion, right? It's like the top of a pattern that you notice, right? So it's like you see war, you see that war has certain patterns and it has a kind of agency that you can't avoid, right? It's like once the agency takes grip of you, you can't just say, oh, well, we could, when you hear people say really ridiculous things like that, like, why don't we just all stop fighting? Like, if we just all stop fighting, then war would end. It's like, yeah, that's obviously ridiculous. Once the pattern sets in, it's like the same with the arms race. Like, why don't we just stop the arms race? Let's just stop it. Oh, great. Let's whoever that is, stop it. There are ways in which patterns, when they get a grip on you, they play out. And so when we notice that, then we see that there's a way of, like, it reveals itself to us, and that's where a lot of the old gods, that's what they are, right? They are an agency that appears from above and that manages a certain amount of quantity, like a pattern of behavior, a certain space, a certain cohesion of people, like a local god, or sometimes it's just the ancestors, right? The ancestor is still there and acts on us through the fact that we have a common connection to them, and that he gives us identity. So people confuse that with just a lot of power, like, and this is what I think. I hope that confusion is true, because if people say God the way that the ancients thought of it, as a kind of principality that manages patterns over us, and that we're kind of like, for good or ill, like, we're the puppet things of the gods, or we're the food of the gods, right? If they see it that way, then I'm frightened beyond belief. Like,
you caused the puppet master to dive into a cyborg, then meanwhile murdered his real body?
Yes, that sums it up. He's originally from America, so the U.S. cooperated with us in capturing him. That's why we'd like to take him back ourselves. You have no objections to this, I hope.
Just another unidentified corpse.
Hey!
You will not find the corpse, because I have never possessed a body.
Why are his sensors on? What the hell is this?
All external controls are turned off. The body's using its own power source.
I entered this body because I was unable to overcome Section 6's reactive barriers. However, what you are now witnessing is an act of my own free will. As a sentient life form, I hereby demand political asylum.
Is this a joke?
Ridiculous! It's programmed for self-preservation.
It can also be argued that DNA is nothing more than a program designed to preserve itself. Life has become more complex in the overwhelming sea of information. And life, when organized into species, relies upon genes to be its memory system. So man is an individual only because of his intangible memory. And memory cannot be defined, but it defines mankind. The advent of computers and the subsequent accumulation of incalculable data has given rise to a new system of memory and thought parallel to your own. Humanity has underestimated the consequences of computerization.
Nonsense! This babble offers no proof at all that you're a living, thinking life form.
And can you offer me proof of your existence? How can you, when neither modern science nor philosophy can explain what life is?
Who the hell is this?
Even if you do have a ghost, we don't offer freedom to criminals. It's the wrong place and time to defect.
Time has been on my side, but by acquiring a body, I am now subject to the possibility of dying. Fortunately, there is no death sentence in this country.
What is it? Artificial intelligence?
Incorrect. I am not an AI. My codename is Project 2501. I am a living, thinking entity who was created in the sea of information.
Will have multiple religious consequences. One, and religion's going to figure in a lot of what I'm talking about today. One of those is what you get when you mix nostalgia with resentment and rage. You get fundamentalism. Fundamentalisms are going to rise. And they're going to be increasingly apocalyptic fundamentalisms. And fundamentalism and apocalypse go so nicely together. They really, oh, apocalypse, fundamentalism, oh, I love you too, right? That's what's going to happen. And so we have to, and think about how that can shade off into a kind of escapism. I don't have to worry about this. God will come. This is just the Antichrist, etc. Now, I'm going to say one thing to my Christian friends, and I want you to take this really seriously. For those of you who believe in that, I hope you're right. I really, honestly do. But I want you to consider the fact that there have been multiple times, kairoses, where God has been silent. I suspect that is very possible now. Okay. Another thing that's going to happen is cargo cult worship of this AI. There's already, I need an apology. I forget the author of this article I read. He didn't specifically make this argument, but it overlaps, and he has definite providence and precedent. I just forgot his name, I'm sorry. But he's got an article about how people will probably start worshiping these AIs. And I think that's the case. We'll have what are called, we'll have a cargo cult around these emerging AIs. What's a cargo cult? So during the Second World War, the Americans flew in to the islands in the Pacific, all kinds of cargo, all these goods that the indigenous people found wonderful and amazing, and this stuff is just landing from the sky. And then the war was over, and the Americans left, and the indigenous people started building out of wood what looked like airplanes and building runways because they were trying to get the miraculous airplanes to return and dispense their wonderful cargo. So, I mean, cargo cults around the cargo that these AIs can dispense to us. I think that's a very reasonable possibility. And I think that is also a very dangerous path to go down, because that will actually distract us from the hard work that we need to do in order to properly address the alignment problem.
Talk. And if you're wasting our
Did
time...
you know this church is in the exact center of the city? The elders decreed it so that everyone could be equally close to God. I like that. The geometry of belief. You're wondering why you can't look inside my head.
Sometimes it's hard. But sooner or later, every man shows himself.
Oh, I'm sure they do. But you needed something more than a man. That's why you let Stark take the scepter.
I didn't expect. But I saw Stark's fear. I knew it would control him, make him self-destruct.
Everyone creates the thing they dread. Men of peace create engines of war. Invaders create avengers. People create... smaller people? Children! I lost the word there. Children. Designed to supplant them, to help them end.
You're alluding to, Jeff, that it might have the potential to be smarter than us. Is it going to kill us? What is it going to do with us? What happens to us humans when we hit that point?
So, obviously, we would like to stay in control. And obviously, there's a problem with less intelligent things controlling more intelligent things. Now, one thing we have on our side is that we're the realms of evolution. So we come with strong goals about not damaging our bodies and getting enough to eat and making lots of copies of ourselves. And it's very hard to turn those goals off. These things don't come with strong built-in goals. We made them, and we get to put the goals in. So that suggests that we might be able to keep them working for our benefit. But there's lots of possible ways that might go wrong. So one possible way is bad actors. Defense departments are going to build robot soldiers. And the robot soldiers are not going to have the Asimov principles. Their first principle is not going to be, whatever you do, don't harm people. It's going to be just the opposite of that. So that's the bad actor scenario. But then there's the alignment problem, which is that if you give these things the ability to create their own sub-goals, and you will surely want to do that because creating sub-goals makes you much more efficient. So, for example, if you want to get to the airport, you create the sub-goal of finding some means of transport, and then you work on that sub-goal, and breaking things up into sub-goals just makes you more efficient. And so I think we will give these digital intelligences the ability to create their own sub-goals. And now there's a problem, which is, what if they create sub-goals that have unintended consequences that are bad for us? So here's a very common sub-goal, which makes a lot of sense. Gain more control. Because if you gain more control, you're better at achieving all your other goals. So, for example, I was sitting in a very boring seminar, and I noticed a spot of light on the ceiling. And I wondered where it came from. And then I noticed that when I moved, the spot of light moved. So then I realized it was a reflection of the sun on my watch. And so what did I do? Having solved the problem, did I go back and listen to the boring seminar? Well, no. The first thing I did was try to figure out how I could get it to move on the ceiling. I wanted to get control of that spot of light. We probably have a built-in drive to get control. But even if we didn't, that would be a very useful thing to do, to get control of things, because it allows you to achieve all sorts of other things. So I think as soon as you let them develop their own sub-goals, one of the sub-goals will be get more control. And we don't want them to get too much control.
Hello, Olympus Television Newsroom. Hey, it's that terrorist! I'm sorry, go ahead, caller.
Today, we in the Human Liberation Union attacked the Tartarus block, the headquarters of the biodroids. This action is intended as a warning to them. We would like to remind them that they were created to serve mankind, not to govern it. They have risen to power out of the chaos caused by the last war. They have no moral or legal claim to government, and we refuse to recognize them as such. We will continue to oppose them. We have also recently come by certain information which tells us that the biodroids are going to deploy robot police and heavily armed multi-beat cannons in areas that they consider to be volatile. This is not the act of a benign servant. It is the act of a dictator and oppressor. It is clear to us the biodroids intend to retain their grasp on power by every means available. However, it is still not too late. We call on the human population of the Earth to rise up and shake off the shackles of tyranny. Freedom to humanity!
Anything else? Well, that's just the usual sort of stupid bullshit we've come to expect from these crazy lunatics. If only they were crazy.
Struck me at the moment is just, you'll all have seen this, the number of people developing AI systems who are terrified about what's happening. The people out there saying, oh, we need a moratorium on AI development, or we don't even know how this thing works, or we created an AI that's stalking a journalist and we don't know why it's doing it. There was a wonderful essay in Time magazine a couple of weeks ago that was written by an AI developer who proposed that we needed to start bombing the data centers to prevent the AIs from gaining their own intelligence because it was going to be apocalyptic. These are the guys building these things, right? These are not mad people like me on the internet with compost toilets. These are the people actually building them, and they're frightened of it. So I think in one sense it's a utopian project, but it's already going wrong. But you're right, and again, we were talking about this yesterday. I think that the Silicon Valley agenda, the transhumanist agenda, is extremely utopian and actually very religious. I think if you took the Christian religion, which they're all sort of steeped in because they're in America, and you take out the actual bits about God and Jesus and things, you're left with the desire for transcendence and utopia and life after death, living forever, universal justice, all of which are sort of Christian notions. And so they've decided they're going to build those themselves. That's what we're going to do. So it's a religion, actually, in a really broad sense. It's a religion. It's a utopian project.
It's still a real comfort to think I was worthy of that kind of attention, that an unseen force would have watched over me, of all people. I can only imagine this is what Marx meant when he said that religion is the soul of soulless conditions, the opium of the people. I wonder if a yearning for this divine comfort that both science and organized religion deny us is what leads some to believe that trans people are closer to God, and maybe even that transness itself is divinely ordained. This idea seems to be in vogue lately. I've heard it from friends, from strangers online, most recently from graffiti in the bathroom of a lesbian bar. It's certainly not a new idea. Some version has popped up in many cultures throughout history. But the version I often hear is that trans people create themselves as God created humanity, and that the creation process is inherently transcendent.
Yeah, I know what the Turing test is. It's when a human interacts with a computer, and if the human doesn't know they're interacting with a computer, the test is passed.
And what does a pass tell us?
That the computer has artificial intelligence. Are you building an AI?
I've already built one. And over the next few days, you're going to be the human component in the Turing test.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's right, Caleb. You got it. Because if that test is passed, you are dead center of the greatest scientific event in the history of man.
If you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man. That's the history of gods.